$900 million. That is the number you need to hold in your mind for the next 17 minutes, because according to analysts and defense observers tracking recent arms transfers, that single figure, $900 million, may represent the moment the military balance of the Middle East began to shift in ways American planners had not fully prepared for. Not a single missile, not a token delivery. According to multiple defense analysts citing open-source satellite and logistics data, this was an integrated, networked, combined arms package. Air defense, strike capability, coastal denial, and the radar architecture to tie it all together. Think about what $900 million buys in context. It is roughly the annual defense budget of a mid-sized European nation, moved in a reported 27 cargo aircraft over a concentrated 2-week window. The scale alone tells you this was not routine military cooperation. It was a signal. Picture it for a moment. Cargo aircraft, wide-bodied and heavy, descending through haze into Iranian airspace one after another over 14 days. On the ground, crews working through the night, unpacking crates that contain not just hardware, but an entirely new defensive and offensive logic. The smell of aviation fuel, the hum of ground support equipment, the quiet efficiency of a transfer that was designed to be noticed. This was not hidden. It was meant to be seen, and the message it sent to Washington, to Tel Aviv, to Riyadh, was received. To understand why this matters, you need one framework. Call it the contested access equation. Here is what it means in one sentence. When the cost of projecting military power into a region exceeds the political benefit of doing so, that power effectively disappears. Not because the weapons are gone, but because they cannot be used. America has not lost a carrier. America has not lost an airbase. But if analysts are correct about what Iran has now received, the calculation for using those assets has changed dramatically. Every scenario that once looked like a manageable risk now carries a significantly higher price tag. That is the contested access equation. And for the next 17 minutes, you're going to watch it play out in real time across the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, and the diplomatic corridors of 4 continents. Let us start with what analysts believe was actually delivered. The centerpiece, according to defense researchers at the Center for Strategic and International Studies and Open Source Tracking by organizations like the Middlebury Institute, is a reported delivery of S-400 Triumph air defense components. The S-400 is Russia's most advanced long-range surface-to-air missile system. Think of it like this. If your Air Force is a chess queen, the most powerful piece on the board, able to move anywhere, the S-400 is the rule change that says the queen now has a 50% chance of being captured every time she crosses into the opponent's half. The system, according to NATO's own public assessments, is capable of tracking and engaging aircraft at ranges up to 400 kilometers and at altitudes spanning from low-flying cruise missiles all the way to the edge of the stratosphere. 4 operational battalions, if the reported numbers are accurate, means overlapping coverage across a significant portion of Iranian airspace and well beyond its borders. Alongside the air defense layer, analysts following the transfer cite the reported inclusion of Iskander-M tactical ballistic missile systems. The Iskander is not a simple rocket. It is a quasi-ballistic weapon, meaning it follows a ballistic arc initially, but then maneuvers during its terminal phase, the final seconds before impact. Think of throwing a football that suddenly changes direction in midair just before it reaches the receiver. Standard missile defense systems are designed to intercept predictable trajectories. The Iskander's maneuvering capability is precisely what makes it difficult to counter with legacy Patriot batteries. With a reported range of approximately 500 kilometers and a circular error probable, the military's measure of accuracy, of around 5 meters, this system, if the delivery figures are accurate, puts every major American installation across the Gulf within potential strike range from Iranian territory. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Al Dhafra in the UAE, Camp Arifjan in Kuwait, all of them fall within that radius. The third layer of the reported package is the Bastion P coastal defense system, equipped with P-800 Onyx supersonic anti-ship missiles. Here is your analogy for this one. Imagine the Persian Gulf as a swimming pool. For 40 years, the American Carrier Strike Group has been the lifeguard, present, authoritative, able to respond to any incident at any point in the pool. The Bastion P, positioned along Iran's 1,500-kilometer coastline, is the equivalent of placing snipers at every corner of the pool. The lifeguard is still there. The lifeguard still has the same capabilities. But now, every time the lifeguard considers entering the deep end, there's a calculation happening that did not exist before. The P-800 travels at approximately Mach 2.5 at sea skimming altitude, barely above the wave tops, which makes it extremely difficult for ship-based radar to detect early. Iran's coastline, if these systems are operational, now commands engagement potential across a significant portion of the Persian Gulf surface. And here is what ties all of it together. According to defense analysts at RAND Corporation and the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies, The truly transformative element of a system like the S-400 package is not the missiles themselves. It is the radar. The reported NEBO-M radar complex is a multi-band system, meaning it operates across different radio frequencies simultaneously. Most stealth aircraft, including the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, America's $1.7 trillion investment in next-generation air power, are designed to reduce their radar cross-section against specific radar bands, particularly the high-frequency bands used by most targeting radars. Lower-frequency radar bands, which systems like the NEBO-M include, can detect stealth aircraft more readily, though typically with less precision. The combination of detection capability at long range feeding into the precision targeting of the S-400 is what creates the layered problem that American planners must now solve. Former Deputy Secretary of Defense Robert Work has publicly stated that integrated air defense systems of this generation represent, in his words, a fundamental challenge to American power projection assumptions. Here is what most people are missing in the mainstream coverage of this story. Every outlet is focusing on the hardware. The missiles, the launchers, the specifications. What they are not focusing on is the integration architecture. These systems, when delivered as a networked package, do not simply add to Iran's capabilities. They multiply them. Here is the mechanism. The NEBO-M radar detects an incoming aircraft. That detection data does not go to one system. It feeds simultaneously to the S-400 for defensive intercept and to the Iskander battery for offensive response calculation. In practical terms, this means that an aircraft approaching Iran to conduct a strike is simultaneously triggering a defensive response against itself and potentially an offensive response against the base it took off from. The attacker and the defender are now operating on two different timelines. The attacker is thinking about the target. The defender is already thinking about the attacker's home. This networked, simultaneous, multi-domain response architecture is what Russian military doctrine calls reflexive control. The ability to shape an adversary's decision-making by making every offensive option carry an immediate and costly defensive response. No mainstream outlet has explained this mechanism. It is the most important part of the story. The second thing mainstream coverage is missing is the political signal embedded in the timing. This transfer, according to analysts at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, did not happen in a vacuum. It happened in a specific window, a period of elevated American-Iranian tensions, ongoing nuclear negotiation stalemate, and a broader realignment between Moscow, Tehran, and Beijing that has been building since 2022. Russia is not simply selling weapons. Russia is demonstrating to every mid-tier power watching that there is an alternative architecture of security relationships available, one that does not require accepting American conditions. The message is not aimed only at Iran. It is aimed at every country currently calculating which side of the emerging multipolar order offers more durable protection. That is a geopolitical advertisement with a $900 million price tag, and it is working. Now, let us talk about the human dimension of this story, because behind every strategic calculation are ordinary people whose lives are being shaped by decisions made in Moscow and Washington. In cities across the Persian Gulf, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Manama, Doha, approximately 35 million civilians live within the geographic footprint of the systems we have been discussing. In Bahrain, home to the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters, a civilian population of roughly 1.5 million people wakes up each morning in a city that sits at the intersection of competing military architectures. In Iranian cities like Avaz, Bandar Abbas, and Isfahan, populations totaling more than 8 million people live near the military and industrial installations that have been the subject of regional tension for 2 decades. These are not abstract coordinates on a planning map. They are people going to work, raising children, running businesses, making the ordinary calculations of daily life inside a geography that major powers are treating as a strategic chessboard. When analysts talk about deterrence and counter-deterrence, the human cost of miscalculation is measured in those 35 million lives. Now, the question every serious viewer needs to answer, what does this mean for your money? Because geopolitics and personal finance are not separate subjects. They are the same subject viewed from different distances. Oil markets have already responded to elevated Gulf tension indicators, with Brent crude showing sensitivity to any Iranian straight disruption narrative. Analysts at Goldman Sachs have modeled a potential $10 to $20 per barrel spike in scenarios involving Hormuz access restriction, through which approximately 21 million barrels of oil pass daily. Defense stocks, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, historically benefit from elevated threat perception driving procurement cycles. Raytheon's stock rose approximately 14% in the 12 months following the 2019 Saudi Aramco strike, which was a far smaller military event than what analysts are currently assessing. Gold is already trading above $2,300 per ounce as of early 2024, partly reflecting exactly the kind of structural uncertainty this story represents. And silver, often overlooked, matters here for 2 reasons. It is a monetary metal that rises with gold in risk-off environments, and it is a critical industrial input for the defense and electronics sectors, meaning that elevated defense spending drives industrial silver demand simultaneously with investment demand. Understanding what is happening in the Persian Gulf is not just intellectually interesting. It is financially necessary. 3 scenarios now. Here is how this plays out, and here is what to watch for each one. First scenario, managed deterrence holds. In this outcome, the delivery serves its stated purpose. It deters American or Israeli military action against Iran. Both sides recalibrate their red lines, and the region settles into a new equilibrium of mutual restraint. Diplomatic backchannels reopen. Nuclear negotiations resume under new parameters that reflect the changed balance. Oil remains elevated but stable in the $85 to $95 range. Defense stocks plateau after an initial bump. Gold holds above $2,200 as a structural hedge, but does not spike. This scenario requires both Washington and Tehran to accept the new balance without testing it. It is possible. It requires political discipline that has not always been present. Second scenario, contained regional adjustment. In this outcome, the delivery triggers a significant restructuring of American basing and operational posture in the Gulf. Not a withdrawal, but a repositioning. Aircraft carriers operate at greater distance. Strike packages are redesigned around longer-range standoff weapons. Israel accelerates its own counter-S-400 research, likely drawing on lessons from Ukrainian battlefield data, where S-300 systems have shown both capabilities and vulnerabilities. Saudi Arabia accelerates its own advanced air defense procurement. The region reorganizes around the new military reality without direct confrontation. Oil trades in a $90 to $110 range, reflecting structural uncertainty. Defense procurement spending rises globally, lifting Lockheed, Raytheon, and BAE systems. Gold and silver both rise as structural hedges, with silver potentially outperforming on industrial demand from the defense manufacturing surge. Third scenario, miscalculation and escalation. In this outcome, either an Iranian proxy action, an Israeli preemptive decision, or an American incident triggers an exchange that tests the systems we have been describing. This is the scenario that nobody in any government wants, but that the architecture of mutual deterrence makes increasingly possible through accident or miscommunication. The consequences here are not linear. Oil disruption through Hormuz affects 21% of global petroleum trade. A single carrier incident, even a non-lethal one, would trigger market responses not seen since 2008. Gold could spike to $3,000 or beyond within weeks. Silver would follow. Defense stocks would surge but then face uncertainty as the scale of the conflict became apparent. This scenario is not inevitable, but it is now more probable than it was 6 months ago, and every serious financial analyst should be pricing that probability into their thinking. If you are the kind of person who wants to understand what is actually happening in the world, not the version that gets filtered through official statements and narrative management, then make sure you are following this channel closely. Think of it less like subscribing to content and more like keeping a real-time intelligence brief on your phone. The people who understand these shifts earliest are the ones who make better decisions. Financial, professional, and personal. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your country in the comments. It genuinely matters which part of the world you're in when you think about these scenarios, and I want to know how this story looks from where you are standing. The weapons have been delivered. The systems, according to analysts monitoring the transfer, are being integrated. The strategic calculation for every military planner operating within 2,000 kilometers of Iranian territory has changed. Watch for 3 specific indicators in the coming days. Whether American carrier strike groups publicly alter their stated operating zones in the Arabian Sea, whether Israeli defense officials begin making unusually candid public statements about the cost of a potential Iran strike, and whether Gulf Cooperation Council members request emergency consultations with Washington about the validity of existing security guarantees. Any one of those 3 signals will tell you which scenario is beginning to unfold. The era of uncontested assumptions about military dominance does not end with a single announcement. It ends quietly in cargo manifests and repositioned ships, in the private calculations of pilots and admirals and heads of state who now face a different set of numbers than they faced last month.